Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. I have Mr. Ray Hill in the audience tonight, and I am so glad that he's here to talk to you, the viewers, about his life and the things that are of interest to him. Mr. Ray Hill has always been one of the most interesting people that I've ever interviewed and gotten to know. He has lived a long and important life advocating for the rights of the underclassmen, for gay rights, for the right to privacy that we're all constitutionally guaranteed, and some of us who live in the criminal justice system think it might be just a myth. It might not be the Constitution, it might be a myth, because 80% of my clients who go to jail for something in their car that they thought they had a right to privacy, which was apparently doesn't exist anymore. And with my reading of the law, it's been eroded ever since the 80s. The cases are weak. Police officers can always say smell, and that is too subjective to argue.
Yeah.
So if you stop someone on traffic, take them out, search them, find something, back into smell, there's not a court in Harris County that'll grant that motion to suppress because your right to privacy, your Fourth Amendment right to be left alone was violated.
Well, Vivian, the right to privacy evolved from minority opinions by Justice Louis Brandeis. He's an interesting fellow. He was the first Jewish person appointed to the Supreme Court of the United States. And he's a great writer. When he's writing for the majority, he's got to compromise with his peers, and he's got to tidy that up, and he's got to come up with something that they all agree with. But when they all disagreed with him, he was free to write it the way he wanted to. And so he came up with a concept that somewhere in that legal search and seizure, somewhere in that one's home is one's castle, is a right to privacy, but that had never been defined. And it was not defined in a majority opinion during his lifetime. He died, and he was replaced by a fellow by the name of William O. Douglas, who thought very highly of privacy. William O. was a pretty saucy guy. He married younger women and all kinds of interesting things on the court. But he thought privacy was valuable. And finally, William O. Douglas got to write the definitive case that established the right to privacy. And that case was Griswold. Griswold was a husband and wife. They lived in Connecticut, where the state of Connecticut had outlawed birth control. And Griswold and his wife got busted with possession of condoms.
Wow.
Busted with rubber. And so that was a criminal case. And so they fought and lost. And it was appealed all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, whereupon the nine justices remembered all of those things that Justice Brandeis had talked about while he was alive. And they said, wait a minute. A married couple in their own bed should be afforded enough privacy to make the decisions to use some rudimentary birth control. So Griswold broke the ice. Griswold established that the marriage bed, because it requires a marriage license, it requires a bed with walls around it, presumably. And if you're in that situation, you've got enough privacy to rubber up.
Wow.
And so that was the beginning of that. Now, every porno case, every obscenity case, every case subsequent, it goes back to Griswold. Because what we're talking about is adults making decisions for private use or function. But the next advance in privacy was the Loving case. Mr. Loving was a white man. Mrs. Loving was not, either white or man. And Virginia had laws against interracial marriage. But they were not affected by those. It's kind of a Romeo and Juliet story. What they really believed was that they had a right to love one another. And there's a new movie out, if you haven't, many of you haven't seen it yet. It's called Loving. It's a well done, expensive. They spent about $400 million making that movie.
How much?
It ain't a
400
cheap
million?
shit. About
Wow.
$400 million. And it's getting rave, New York Times raves reviews, Los Angeles, every reviewer in the country that's seen it has had very positive things. They find little niggling problems, but very positive things about it. It's a high dollar fine production. And it's a great story. But then you get to the point was, well, the marriage license was there, but not legally in Virginia.
Right, because they got married in another state.
They got married in D.C.
In D.C., where it was legal for, I think they called it misogyny at the time.
Yeah.
That's intermarriage, interracial marrying. And then when they came back to Virginia to live,
The cops come kick the door in.
Kicked the door in and arrested them.
Yep. And
they went to jail for a considerable amount of time before they could get to trial.
Yep, it took them a long time to go to trial, and they didn't necessarily win the first time. And
Right. They lost in every court all the way up to the highest court in Virginia.
And
had
then
to take
the
it to
Supreme Court said, wait a minute. If these Griswold folks are afforded privacy, it's not much of a stretch to think these Loving folks deserve some privacy.
Wasn't that a great title? That's his last name, Loving, and then it's Loving versus
It's Loving
Virginia.
versus Virginia. And what is Virginia's advertising campaign?
I don't know.
Virginia is a place to go for love.
Probably because of that case.
That is exactly why they
I
have
don't remember
adopted
many
that
cases from law school, but I remember it because it's a love story and it's Loving versus Virginia. It's just so easy to remember.
Right. And so that was the next part. Well, the next one after that was a Texas case called Roe v. Wade. A woman's got the private right to control her body. Now, that is a big jump from this marriage bed, because there's no marriage license involved in Roe v. Wade. It's a woman has got the right to control her body. And that was written up. The main writer for that was from Minnesota. I forget his name, but he was a progressive gang. William O. Douglas was still on the court and joined in the majority, but that case was decided, and that was the next expansion of privacy. And then the next expansion of privacy is one of my cases, the Lawrence case.
Tell us about Lawrence.
Well, Lawrence was a 56, 57-year-old gay guy, and he met a early 30s guy and carried him home. And the deputy sheriff came and kicked the door down and charged him with violating Section 2106 of the homosexual practice law in the Texas Penal Code. Now, before 2106 was on the law books, there was a felony law in that position, and it was called the sodomy law. And the thing that made the sodomy law difficult to challenge is because it was based on the act of oral or anal sex, and it applied equally to homosexual and heterosexual. It was never prosecuted against heterosexuals. It was frequently charged in rape cases, but they backed off of it because rape carried a better, higher punishment.
Right.
They just brought that. That was rape. But they prosecuted against homosexuals. And while I was doing time in prison, they changed the law from the sodomy statute to 2106, a Class C misdemeanor law. And when they did that, the governor pardoned 5 old men that were doing time on the Ramsey prison with me, who had been sentenced to life in prison for multiple convictions under the sodomy law.
Wow.
It was the sodomy law in combination with the Habitual Criminal Act. So I was in this room. The warden paid for the party because they were going to get out the next day, and I was the #1 eunuch on the Ramsey, and I run the maintenance department. They called me, "Oh, hell, you want to go down and visit them boys and fare thee well?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I'll go by commissary and pick up." I told that commissary lady to give you everything you wanted, and I'd pay for it.
What?
So the warden gave me a sack full of commissary, and I went down to the punk wing. That's where homosexuals live.
Back as a little girl, I'm 58. We called gays punks.
Yeah, and there was punk wing.
I didn't know they did that in the white community too. I
No,
thought that
no,
was
no,
a black
no, no.
community. In San Antonio,
Well-
they call gay guys punks.
Vivian.
I never hear that anybody say that but me.
Vivian,
What?
prison culture comes from slave culture,
Okay.
black culture, and and hobo culture.
Hobo. Okay.
That's the cultural gestalt there.
Okay. So that's the punk wing.
It's the punk wing, and gay people live there. I didn't live. I'm the number one eunuch on the farm. I'm the most openly gay guy on the Ramsey. I live in the construction wing
And how did you manage to have
because
that
I
deal?
work with them guys.
Okay.
I was their bookkeeper.
Okay.
I'd say, well,
Why couldn't you go home to the punk wing at night?
well, it's easier to make job assignments in the wing with a convict that I'm going to have to put on cruise the next day.
Gotcha.
And in prison, a bookkeeper has a lot of decisions to make about how you move personnel around. And so I'm in there with them, and so there's some guys that come up and say, Ray, I'm getting tired of this stuff working on the sewage plant. Fine. We'll get somebody else to do that work. You go work in the boiler room, or I get to assign people.
Gotcha.
And all I got to do is tell my boss about it, and he checks off up. That happens. No further question. And so the warden called me and said, why don't you go down and throw these boys a party? So I went down and threw the boys a party. There were 5 old men. He called them boys.
But they were actually old men.
They were old men. I knew about one of them. I didn't know him, but I knew about him because Alvin Buchanan had appealed his cases. So I read about him in the Southwest Reporter and in the Federal Supplement. And if you look in the books for Alvin Buchanan, sodomy laws, you can read Sarah T. Hughes's opinion denying his appeal. And it reads like the homophobic manual. And Sarah T. was considered a pretty good federal judge in Dallas. She's the one that swore in Lyndon Johnson. And
Wow.
She called William O. Douglas and said, I don't know whether to use an American Standard Bible or a King James Version. And William O. Douglas said, Judge, you can use the Dallas phone book. Will work just as well.
To swear me in.
To swear in Lyndon Johnson on that plane after JFK's assassination.
Wow.
See, you know, pick up tidbits like this.
I know it. That's why you're invaluable to me.
And so I knew about Alvin's case. None of the rest of them had really appealed. 2 of them were a couple from Snyder, Texas. It was a white guy and a Hispanic guy.
And they were in prison together?
They were in prison together for the same cases.
Wow.
Because the white guy had inherited some land, and his cousin or uncle, some relative, wanted to range, was the high sheriff, and wanted to range the sheriff's cattle on his land. So when they'd get out of prison and go back to Snyder, the deputy sheriffs would come kick the door down. Whether we're doing anything or not, they'd just lie. They're going to get convicted again. So 3 times life in prison. And so they were enjoying getting out. They thought it was funny that under the new misdemeanor law, that if the sheriffs came and kicked the door down, and they would write them a ticket and then leave so they could go back to do whatever it was they were doing. And they were, but Vivian, here's the real story, and I want all activist types to listen to me. Because the other 2 guys who were living in the punk wing, who were there for sodomy, said, we don't know what you're talking about. We're glad we're getting pardoned, but we're down here for doing other stuff. They could not even admit that they were gay on the occasion of being given a pardon for the governor to go home.
Wow.
And that is the closet.
That's the closet.
That's the real enemy. That's because black people get caught in that trap of denial. I'm not really oppressed. Nobody's mistreating me. Well, what about your job application for the last 5 jobs?
That's true.
And you live in denial about that. Well, these guys were living in denial.
Wow.
And so that was a very valuable experience for me in my activism is to go down there and meet those folks. And I walked with them out to you see these big white buses that prisoners ride in with the screens?
Right, yes.
And watched them get on the bus and wished them good luck. Never heard from any. Oh, well, I called Alvin years later, and he had told me one thing. He's never going to go back to Dallas. That's where he fell. And he was living in Arlington.
Same difference. Now it is, same difference.
But that set up 2106.
Okay.
And it was a Class C misdemeanor. And what I didn't realize, that was written in Senator Barbara Jordan's office.
Wow.
With Craig Washington there, and Mickey Leland, and Benny Reyes, and Ron Waters, all in the room, because Texas legislature had passed the model penal code that left all that out. But the governor wouldn't sign the new criminal code because they didn't have anything in there about homosexual. The governor was Dolph Briscoe. So they wrote this Class C misdemeanor law.
So it wouldn't be a felony anymore. Now
it would not be a right. They said, what's the least we can do? The governor's not going to sign it unless we put something in, and we need to pass this penal code. And you practice law on what at one time was the model penal code that was adopted in Texas in 1973 while I was in prison. But did you know before I went to prison, I met the guys that wrote the model penal code?
No.
Arthur Varner.
Okay.
Princeton aristocracy, law professor, president then of the American Law Institute. Arthur had a Nash, and you're too young to remember Nashes, but they were cars. They were travel cars. And Arthur used to drive all the way down from Princeton, New Jersey, and pick me up, and we would cruise the highways of West Texas together.
Wow.
So I'm sitting next to the Nash.
Does cruise have a
well, it's a Nash. It cruises.
Okay.
But then you have eyes, so they cruise too.
Oh, yes.
You got it. Okay.
I got it.
You can read between the lines. So Arthur and I are cruising because they're like truck stops.
Yes.
That's a specialty.
That's a special place.
Yeah. And so here we're driving from truck stop on the West Texas highways, and I'm reading the galleys for the model penal code. And I said, Arthur, there's not anything in here about sodomy or homosexuals. And he said, yeah, and I left the chickens and the goats out too.
All right.
Because I wasn't getting a lot of complaints from chickens and goats.
I hear you.
See what I mean?
But it was still added in, so our governor at the time
forced the add in something, and
Governor
Craig
Briscoe.
Washington probably, who was the best lawyer in the room, probably authored it. Barbara was a lawyer too, but she didn't actually practice law. Craig did. Craig wrote a Class C misdemeanor law to go in there. Mickey was like a dentist or an ophthalmologist.
Why do you say that?
Because he never got a law degree. He went to TSU to study ophthalmology or dentist or something. But God, he was a pharmacist. He was a pharmacist, okay. I appreciate words from heaven.
I know, words from heaven. Yeah, he was a pharmacist. I never knew what he was because he was always a politician.
He was a sweetheart. Those pretty blue eyes.
Yep, he was a
and
nice
that
guy.
fair skin.
Yeah, he was a nice
And
guy.
I never shook hands with Mickey Leland. Every time I'd reach out to shake hands, he'd pull me and we'd hug.
Oh, that's sweet. He was a sweet man.
He was a wonderful man. And see, I knew people like that before I went to prison. So I kept up with them while I was in prison. And so that's how I know what happened in Barbara Jordan's office. Because Ron Waters was there, and with Ron Waters was Deborah Denberg, his administrative aide. And she wrote me a letter and told me how that came down.
Well, the interesting thing I know about the model penal code is when I became a lawyer in '92, it was still in effect. And it changed after Ann Richards was defeated by Daddy Bush, governor.
It began to change.
It began to change. From that time on, it changed from January '95. When did he win? I think it was '93. I think he won in '92. So January of '93, they said that the penal code hadn't been changed in 30 years.
Yeah.
And so this is the 30 years.
And so
significantly, it had been the same. There have been changes, but it wasn't significant. Like, I think a man used to beat his wife, or there were old laws where men didn't get in trouble if they killed their wife. Major equal rights things had changed, but other than that, they said it nothing major.
Well, I mean, that's the problem with penal codes, is that they start out well-intentioned.
Well, 30 years is a good barometer because the problem with practicing since 1992 is that it changes every 2 years, every legislative cycle. So lawyers are not even on notice as to what the law is. I mean, every client that comes in my office, even if it's for something I did last year, I have to check the code again. So no one knows what the law is because it's constantly changing, and you don't have notice.
And if you're limited to dealing with issues that are exclusively a state matter, and you don't have a federal constitutional leg to stand on, then you depend on state elected judges who follow the will of what do I have to do to be tough enough on crime to get reelected.
And I wish that it was changed, not only just like nonpartisan. I wish that judges, before they could run, had to take some type of test to say that they even knew the law. Whatever the current penal code is and whatever the current code of criminal procedure, which is what we take to become board certified. I think they should all be board certified. So at least at some point they know the law. Because
well, I mean, but
the most frustrating thing about practicing is that you're constantly approaching judges who you got to show them what's in the penal code or what's in the code of criminal procedure, and they're the ones making the decision. So
some of those
difficult.
Appellate courts have dual jurisdiction. They deal with civil case this morning.
They do. But since I deal with criminal and it's someone's life and not money, I mean, you need to know what the law is. There was a question that was just posed: how do cases get to the Supreme Court? And it can get there multiple ways. You can go first, if it's a state case, you go through all the state levels, which is the Court of Appeals. 1st and 14th are in Houston. They see civil and criminal courts, and then they split up when they get to Austin. So if you win or lose at the Court of Criminal, at the Appellate Court, Court of Appeals, then you can appeal if it's criminal to the Court of Criminal Appeals, and then if it's civil, it goes to the Texas Supreme Court. They split. And then if you don't like that ruling, you might have a way to appeal to the federal district court, which is like Judge Atlas. One of the 20 federal ones.
You have to file in the federal.
You have to file there, and then if you can keep going all the way up through the Fifth Circuit, is our circuit here, and then you can get to the Supreme Court if they feel that there's a question. The Supreme Court is very difficult to get to. There has to be different states or different jurisdictions have to be making a totally different decision on the same law. That's how you basically get to the Court of Appeal. I mean,
let me do the Lawrence case trail, because when I went to the Supreme Court with Hill versus Houston, which is a case where I was arrested for calling 2 officers a name unbecoming of their relationship with their mothers, and I got arrested for that. And it was very clear that I got arrested for that. They charged me with interfering, and indeed, I had intended to interfere with their beating the young man in my front yard. They dragged a young black man in my yard, and they pulled out their flashlight and started beating him, and I intended. Mea culpa, I intended to stop that beating. Well, when I called them that particular motherly noun, they did stop beating him. As a matter of fact, they forgot entirely about him. They walked off and left him laying there, and he got up and went away because I had insulted them so highly that they were coming for me, which I suggested. I said, why don't you call them a name, said, why don't you leave the kid alone and mess with me? And they came, and they did exactly what I told them to do, and they threw me in the back of that squad car, and my companion was calling them far worse than I was, but that was in Spanish, and they didn't understand it. So they packed me off to jail, and but I won the case. And then I went to federal court and sued.
Wow.
Okay. So let's move forward.
So you sued the officers?
I sued the officers and the city for the inconvenience of going to jail, because I had done that before. And my rate for going to jail is $50 a minute. All I got to do is prove that it's bull hockey, and I get paid well. And I have great lawyers, better lawyers than they got. And Jerry, I'm glad you're listening out there. Jerry Bernberg is my briefing attorney.
Gotcha.
And he is
very smart
no
lawyer.
Small potatoes lawyer. And he anguishes over those cases like you wouldn't believe. But we went up from federal district court all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, and we won 8-1. It wasn't even close. Well, while my lawyers were studying the findings of facts and conclusions of law, I was studying the trail. Because if I can protect my rights through this process of going through the federal courts, I can expand my rights if I consciously know how this is working. So in the Lawrence case, they call me in the middle of the night, and they tell me that John Lawrence, now deceased, and Tyrone Garner, his friend, were busted and charged with 2106.
The sodomy law.
Which was the equivalent to sodomy law, but now it's a Class C misdemeanor, but they get arrested and carried to jail in their drawers.
Right.
So my first words are, well, the hard part is to convince your friends we've got to lose their case. Because if you don't lose, you don't have anything to appeal. And that case goes to a Justice of the Peace Court in North Shore, Judge Parrott's court.
Okay.
Well, I got some stroke in Judge Parrott's court. I know his political operative, who is Cheryl Ropolo. So I called Cheryl at home and said, Cheryl, get over to the courthouse. You got two guys in the holding tank in their drawers. And so she goes over there and she said, the judge is going to dismiss the case. I said, no, Cheryl, that can't happen. The judge cannot dismiss this case. Tell you what, I'll come get the guys in their drawers. And you use the excuse that the judge don't want them in his courtroom in their drawers.
Right.
Delay, by a delay. And then I get Mitchell Katine and David Jones on the case. And they go out there and David Jones fashions a motion to quash. And he said, well, what do you want me to cite in here? And I said, Byers v. Hardwick. He said, wait a minute, Byers v. Hardwick, we lost that case at Supreme Court. And I said, I don't want to give this judge any options. So the judge ruled against us, and that's what we initially appealed. Then it goes to Harris County Criminal Court from JP
County
Court.
Right.
County Criminal Court.
County Criminal Court.
And it winds up in Janice Law, and I don't trust Janice.
Oh, Janice Law, that's in County Court number 5. She took Hannah Child's place.
Right. I don't trust her.
She used to wear gloves.
I don't trust her. So I go to Sherman Ross, who was my friend, and I said, Sherman, you're the presiding judge. Can you pluck this out of Janice Law's court? And he said, sure. I said, put it in your court. And he said, what are you going to do with it? And I said, I want you to uphold the lower court and pass it on. So we go to 3-judge panel. And Vivian,
Do you remember if you went to the 1st or 14th court?
14th court, 3-judge panel, and we won.
You won?
We won. I wasn't planning on this. We got 3 Republican judges. I didn't think there was any way we could win, but we won 2-1. And now I'm dead in the water. I'm in the doldrums. There's no wind in my sail. I've got nothing to appeal from there. And so I say, how do I get Johnny Holmes to appeal this 3-judge case? Johnny's not a dummy. He knows what I am doing. So I called Stephen Hotze from a payphone in the courthouse. And Dr. Steve, you told us to vote for them good Christian judges, and I pick up the paper here and they've done sided with the queers. I don't know how you expect us to listen to you on these judges. What is your position on queers? Stephen Hotze, being an excitable entity, went ballistic. He didn't consult anyone. He called a news conference. He referred to the judges that voted for our position as modern-day Judases.
Oh, wow.
And he said, we will never support them for anything for the rest of their lives. And then the en banc judges saw what he did to them. Johnny Holmes did, in fact, appeal. It went to en banc, and they didn't even write an opinion. They just reversed the 3-judge panel, and now I'm at the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. I'm at the top criminal court in the state. And they saw what was said about those other judges. They didn't write an opinion. And that gives me a free shot to the Supreme Court of the United States. We got to the United States Supreme Court, Johnny Holmes sends Chuck Rosenthal to argue the case. And Chuck is, bless his heart, he's so pompous, he is so ill-prepared, he is just so full of himself, and he makes a complete... Nina Totenberg of NPR said it was the worst presentation before the Supreme Court in her memory. And we won 6-3.
At the United States Supreme Court. How was it a relevant or important enough case for the Supreme Court to accept?
There is no further appeal from the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals except Supreme Court of the United States.
I know, but you have to file a writ of certiorari, and they can either say yes.
Oh, yeah, they can say yes, and they can say
no. So I'm just saying, why was it important enough to say yes?
Here's what the deal was. There was a division between the circuits.
Okay, that's the point I was trying to make.
The Ninth Circuit was ahead of us.
Okay.
The Fifth Circuit is way behind.
Right.
But we don't go from circuit. We go from the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. We don't go through the circuit. We go directly to the Supreme Court of the United States. But there was that conflict back there in the margins. And the Supreme Court dealt with it.
And that's when they take it, when there's a conflict with the different parts of the country.
Yep, and it was really a beautiful occasion. I thought we were going to win it on equal justice because I knew that I had O'Connor's vote on equal justice, because in a previous case called Hardwick v. Bowers, in Hardwick, Justice O'Connor said, if we were here on equal justice, but see the Georgia statute, which Bowers was the district attorney of Atlanta, the Georgia statute applied to both homosexuals and heterosexuals.
Gotcha.
And so, Sandra Day O'Connor joined the majority and gave the bad for our side ruling, saying if we were here on equal justice, I would have voted the rest the other way, but there was no equal justice issue. In the Texas case, there would have been an equal justice. So I thought they were going to decide it on equal justice because I knew I knew there were 4 justices prepared to vote with us and Sandra Day O'Connor. Turned out there were 6.
And let me just read you something from the holding in Hardwick, in Bowers v. Hardwick. So it was a Georgia law classifying homosexual sex as illegal sodomy was valid because there was no constitutionally protected right to engage in homosexual sex. The 11th Circuit reversed and remanded. And the case pending, the majority was White, joined by Berger, Powell, Rehnquist, and O'Connor. And
in O'Connor's written supporting opinion to the majority.
And that's crazy. That was in 1986. The United States Supreme Court overturned in 2003 that upheld the constitutionality.
Yeah, that's the Lawrence case.
So Lawrence is the one that overturned it. So
Bowers.
Up until 2003, it was illegal to engage in sodomy.
Yeah, but the Georgia statute did not differentiate between homosexual and heterosexual.
No, it was just the act.
The opinion you read said homosexual act, but it was the act, not the homosexual or heterosexual.
Right. And when you go closer, it says the constitutionality of a Georgia sodomy law criminalizing oral and anal sex, as you said before, in private between consenting adults, in this case with respect to homosexual sodomy, though the law did not differentiate between homosexual sodomy and heterosexual sodomy. It's just that the Georgia law,
but
the people who got Hardwick was just happened to be homosexual.
Yeah, had it differentiated, O'Connor would have voted the other way in Hardwick. And
but
she
because
said
it was
so,
a general statute.
Because it was general. She said if we were here on a equal protection claim, then I would have voted the other way. But that claim was not raised in this because it was not appropriate to the statute. See, that's why the details about the statute and what it says is really important in the process of considering the Supreme Court of the United States can be used to bring about substantive progress in the field of human rights and dignity. but you have to think it out. And you have to prepare yourself for the trail of how do you get from here to there and protect your principle, because things can go on a tangent in a New York minute.
That's true. How do you think, I know you know, but explain to the viewers how in this line of cases, the law was passed last year for homosexuals to marry, or that was equal
Well, I
protection
mean,
also.
Scalia, we get
That was equal protection too.
yeah, we get that from Scalia, because Scalia, in his dissent to the Lawrence case, said if we do this, the next thing you know, we're going to have to deal with same-gender marriage, and he just laid it out, and we said, what a wonderful idea, and we went to work on it immediately.
I know it, and many years later we got it. So what about, is there anything we want to talk about Amy Goodman?
Amy Goodman who's a big hero. All of you who watch HMS know Amy Goodman's here every morning, and she's on KPFT Pacifica every morning. And Democracy Now! Is really a wonderful news show. Well, she went to North Dakota to join to cover the disagreement between the pipeline layers and the Native Americans who are trying to protect their water rights. And yes, her story goes out, and it's a story that is, as you would expect with Amy, it's slanted in support of the folks who are trying to protect their water rights. And they arrest her for inciting a riot.
Wow.
Now, if you are at the scene where there's a demonstration, and you've got a camera, and you've got a microphone, and you've got a camera tech, and they're going to accuse you of inciting a riot, that ain't going to work in any regular court, much less any appellate court in this country, but they try it. And so what happened, she did it wrong. I love Amy like a sister. I worked with Amy on stories, criminal justice stories. But she did not have a trial. She, by action of her attorneys, were able to avoid a trial. If I had been there, I would not have done a damn thing until after the trial, because I want the arresting officers under oath on that stand trying to convince a court to convict me of that which I know for absolutely certain they can't sustain that conviction. They may get it in that courtroom, but they can't sustain that.
Because you have a right to protest.
And you have a right to go there with a camera and watch and record that. And
just like a news crew. It's amazing to me
She is
how,
a news crew.
But I'm just saying, even if you're not, everyone has the same rights as a news crew.
No,
news crew doesn't have more rights in the Constitution than I do. Everybody has a right to do that.
Right. And there's everybody's got a motion picture camera in their purse.
That's right. And the Constitution says you can do it.
That's right. And no, me and Police Chief Mondavi, I love Police Chief Mondavi. You know her?
I have met her briefly at one of the
No, I've gotten, she said on Channel 8 the other day, they said, well, how's the relationship between the police and the gay community now? And she said, well, I used to be afraid of Ray Hill. Now I consider him my friend.
Good for you. Good for you. That means you've been
and it's not because I haven't carried her to the woodshed. I carried her to the woodshed over a rough ride. And I said, no, that ain't what happens. You arrest somebody and give them a rough ride and get them beat up before they get to jail. No, that ain't what happens in Houston. And she got on it. She issued a directive, and the officers that were involved were in lots of trouble.
So on the Amy Goodman case, so she didn't.
She should have gone.
She just settled it.
Yeah, no. Now, if she wants to pursue, they dismissed the case. She walked out free.
Oh, they dismissed
now, if she wants to sue, she's got to track them suckers down. She got to pay for a stenographer. She got to depose them, and it would have been so much easier to go to the courtroom and put them on the stand, Vivian. Right. I mean, you know how to cross-examine a witness.
Oh, trust me, I've been doing it all week.
Yes.
Even today.
Yeah, you know how to do that. And you know that the jewels that come out in that cross-examination. That's how all of my cases have been. I don't even have a lawyer when I try my Class C misdemeanor cases. I represent myself. As a non-officer of the court, I can get away with more than my lawyer can.
Right.
Because that judge got to listen to my argument and he's got to allow my questions.
That's true.
Because I'm not an officer of his court.
That's true.
He can't order
The
me.
unfortunate part is there's no stenographer.
No.
Class C misdemeanor.
Yeah, but I get one.
Okay.
The first thing I do is make a motion that there be a record.
Okay.
And I get a stenographer in Judge Breen's court, in Sam Alfano's court. I get a stenographer in there.
Okay.
and make it happen. And they know what I'm doing. These are all my friends. I know all these judges.
And I know you've told them your strategy.
Oh, yeah. No, I make no bones of it. Judge Breen said, well, Mr. Hill, if you're going to represent yourself, what is Mr. Manus doing sitting there next to me? I said, he's a very dear friend, Your Honor, and as an officer of the court, he can sit at my table if he wants to.
That's true. That's true. So have you talked to Amy Goodman about her trial
Yes,
strategy?
I talked to Amy.
You think maybe she just didn't want to travel back and
No,
forth?
she didn't have a concept of the strategy. She don't mind going to California. She don't mind going to North Dakota. She's popular there. She got friends there. They wear feathers and beat drums. And no, Amy's a trooper. I've been I was driving through the woods in East Texas after a death row escape in a truck with Amy. Our truck was searched about every 100 yards.
Wow.
And when I saw the director of prison, he said, Raymond, what are you doing over there? I said, we're trying to pick up hitchhikers. That was not what he wanted to hear.
That kind of went out in the 60s.
Yeah.
Picking up hitchhikers.
Yeah, I know.
That's when we were free.
Especially when there's a prison escape from death row.
Really? Right. Well, what were you doing out there, Raymond?
I was up there covering the execution of a Canadian that didn't happen, but that same night, inmate Guerrero escaped from death row.
Did they ever catch him?
Oh, they killed him. He died at the river's edge. And Amy went through the swamp next to the river, and I could see water moccasins bigger than my arm in there. And she got down to where the body was laying on the ground at the edge of the water. She covered.
They shot him, killed him?
Yeah. They shot him coming over the fence,
Okay.
and he made it to the river.
Wow. They let her get that close, the police?
They didn't let her. She just hogged it.
Okay.
She's an aggressive reporter.
Just didn't get arrested that time.
I just wish that I'd had a chance to talk to her in North Dakota before she let that trial slip through her fingers.
So what's next?
Well, I am concerned about the incoming administration. I listened with some degree of horror that Ted Cruz is being considered to be the nominee to the Supreme Court to replace Antonin Scalia. And then I gave that a little thought, and I'm not so worried about that. Ted Cruz is not a team player. He is not collegiate enough for the court. He charts his own course and be damned what other people think. You cannot function on the Supreme Court that way. Scalia got along with Ginsburg and everybody else. It's a very collegial atmosphere. He's a very jovial guy, very nice guy. He wrote very nice things about me because I got his opinion in Hill versus Houston. And he gets along with the court very well. But Ted Cruz first shut the government down, and then denied he shut the government down. And he has as many fights with the Republicans as he has Democrats. He's not a collegiate fellow. He thinks God has empowered him to have the power that he has, and he plans on use it as a command of God. So what does he care about other people's opinion? I think if incoming President Trump chooses to put Ted Cruz on the court, it might be a great blessing in disguise because they will isolate him and not have to pay any attention to him at all. And he might even, his being there, move Thomas further to the left.
That'll never happen.
Yeah, it does.
You think it can? Oh, you have faith.
Well, and I've studied the court. I've studied courts that existed before my lifetime. I studied Brandeis Court with great fascination. And there's plenty of, if you want to study something, they got a lot of material about the Supreme Court that you can read and study.
I took constitutional law in college, so law school. Read it a lot. Okay, I didn't know Ted Cruz's educational background. I'm looking it up. He went to Princeton undergrad and Harvard, so he has the educational background.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I didn't know where he came from.
Yeah, he's a Harvard law school grad.
He's young though. He was born in 1970.
Yeah. But he comes from such a far end of the religious field that he thinks that he is commanded by God to do what he does.
I know it.
And if you're commanded by God, you really don't have to listen to anybody else.
Right. It would be difficult to listen to arguments.
You can't listen to him. You're mortal. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg will have him for lunch.
Now, I've been seeing great little pictures about her. I've been in a murder trial all week. I've been in trial all summer. So tell me why her picture is floating
Everybody
around.
is telling her, don't retire. Remember before we found out that the Republicans were not going to recognize anything that Obama appointed, people were saying, Ruth, it's time to give up seat. She's very old. But I trust Ruth. She'll know when. And but see, if they put Ted Cruz in. Now, here's what I'm doing with the incoming administration. Do you remember the Orlando massacre?
Yes.
When the Orlando massacre happened, my community and I came together and we said, wait a minute, we don't want to trade one form of hate for another one. Yes, the bad actor, was a Muslim, but we do not want, and he hated us or he would not have targeted us, but we do not want to hate him back.
Right.
So we called together through Montrose Center and the Interfaith Council, imams and ministers. Bill Lawson was there, Bishop Fiorenza was there, I was there, Mustafa was there, Robert Muhammad was there. We called together all of these people of different faiths and different saying, and we said, look, we're not going to practice hate. If somebody in your congregation or group hates us, that's fine, that's somebody. But we want you to understand that we're not going to tolerate for a minute people in our group hating back.
Right.
And I'm going to put that coalition back together again.
Very good.
Along with the ACLU and the Archdiocese and immigration groups and the NAACP and Urban League and all of these faith Muslim people. And if the Trump administration comes from the Muslim, then we'll all be Muslims. And if the Trump administration goes to separate families of people with questionable documentation, then we all become people with questionable documentation. Put a united front up there, and we'll let legal people do legal things, and we'll let medical people do medical things, because we don't want anybody denied health care either.
I agree. So she's 83 years old.
Yeah.
So she's had, she practices Judaism, and she graduated from Columbia Law School in 1959.
I graduated from Galena Park High School in 1959.
I was born in 1958, so she's been around a long time. She's been around a long time. So bless her heart for trying to hang on in there.
And she is our savior with Oberfeld and Windsor, the marriage cases.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Okay, well, she did make time to have a kid. She has one daughter.
Yeah.
Born in 55, so before she went to law school. That's impressive. Yeah. Oh, no, she has a son, too. All right, well, she lived a full life.
Well, it's pretty scary. We just go through election season and everything changes. On the national level, it's horrifying. On the local level, I think all the best people got elected, Vivian.
I have hope on the local level.
Yeah.
That's where I did all my work, and I'm sure
I was
that's where
talking
you
to
did.
I was talking to Jerry Bernberg in preparation because we're going to have a shindig to celebrate Lane Lewis, who was my protege.
Gotcha.
I brought Lane Lewis from behind the bar to be president of the caucus and launch his political career that way.
Okay.
And now he's chair of the Democratic Party, and he just pulled a wonderful coordinated effort. And so we're going to get together and say, thank you, Lane, congratulations, and we love you, that sort of thing. That's in addition to this other larger coalition. And we're going to do that basically in a leadership meeting between now and the first of the year, and then between the first of the year and the inauguration, we're going to have a teach-in where we fill the big auditorium at TSU or the big auditorium at University of Houston with our constituents, and we're going to come to an understanding of this is a we all get bonded together and we all stand with each other. That's good planning. That's just good diplomacy. But I was talking to Jerry Bernberg about the Lane Lewis thing, and Jerry Bernberg said Obama carried Harris County by 2,000 votes in 2008. He carried Harris County by 1,000 votes in 2012. Hillary Clinton carried Harris County with 112,000 votes.
Well, it showed you how more willing the women, the Republican women, probably voted for her. This is a very business-oriented town.
Yep.
A lot of universities, I moved here to go to college.
Yeah.
So college-educated women, I would think, would break from their normal politics to vote for Hillary.
I've had occasion to go out to West Houston and talk to some of those folks.
I mean, I think women of my age believe in Roe versus Wade. We were the abortion generation.
Of course.
No one talks about it. The ones who had them in the 70s and 80s deny it. But I think they want their children. We want our children, although it's a difficult and scary thing. You don't want a man telling you what to do with your body.
No.
And then I think that they realize a lot of us my age broke the glass ceilings to even get into jobs. When I graduated in 1980 and went to the bank, it was almost all men. Mm-hmm. And so we lived through that era. So I know for me personally, when she won the nomination and they had that glass ceiling crash, I cried because I left the old banking business because I bumped my head on that proverbial glass ceiling and changed professions after 9 years.
My niece, Mary,
that's how I got to law school.
Mary Bramlett at the time, now Mary Gibbs, filed a equal rights for women's case against a Silver Springs, Maryland branch bank and won. And she became a expert in bank mergers. And she lives here in Houston. And her case is one of the pioneering cases in banking about a recognition of women for the value of their work.
So I believe that there were a lot of women like me that voted for Hillary Clinton, more so than Obama. Obama was a novelty because he was unknown, he had a funny name, we'd been through 9/11, his middle name was Hussein, and he was black. So, I mean, there were a lot of reasons, and that silly birther issue. And so, but with Hillary, everyone knows Hillary, so either you're going to vote for her or you're going to be sexist and think of all the bullcorn for you not to vote for her, but you know that she's worked from the 70s in politics, going door to door, back for McGovern from the 70s. I mean, everybody knows. I'm from San Antonio, so I saw her going door to door. I was in high school. So people know that she's always worked hard her whole life. And a lot of people, I think a lot more people could relate to Hillary in Houston than Obama, really.
In 2008, one of my closest political allies.
We have 3 minutes.
You may have heard Anise Parker.
Sure.
She supported Hillary, I supported Obama. We had a meeting, and we decided that we would let the caucus decide who to support, and we had freedom to speak up for our candidates.
Now, I supported Obama against Hillary.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously,
so
because
did I, but Anise Parker, for very different reasons, supported Hillary.
But I did support Hillary this time.
And when Obama got the nod from the caucus, we rushed to another gay organization and saw to it that Hillary got the nod over there. We cut the baby in half. And that's just good politics, Vivian.
Right, and it's friends, respecting each other's opinion, which we wish our government did. One of the things that I've been so disappointed over the last 15 years is the lack of respect in our government. I believe that when people win, no matter which side it is, be willing to work together. And I have been so disappointed about the non-movement in Congress, about everything that Obama tried to get. They'd say no, no, no. I hated the Republican attitude in Congress for the party of no. I mean, and that is not the way we were raised that government worked. That's not the way we saw government worked. Once people got there, they did their jobs, and they left politics alone till it was time to run again. They went there and got their jobs and were basically anonymous, and we can trust that they were looking out for the public good. Now, you see partisan, and you can't help but believe that it's because of lobbyists and dollars, because it can't be for people, because people need your vote. We need Congress people to do their job.
And we need your continuity.
Yes, and just like Obama says, he says it eloquently, do your job. When you go to Congress, you didn't go there to say no. You didn't go there to follow some idol god. You went there to represent the constituents in your communities all over the country. Do your job. We have 1 minute, so
let me say
sum it
thank
up.
you very much for having me on as a guest. I always have a good time with you. This is a joy for me. I love the studio, of course. I'm the president of the board around here.
Yay!
And I love coming in here with you. You have a very lively show, and appreciate you putting up with me for a whole hour.
I've missed you. I don't think you've been here this year at all.
No.
But I knew that you had some health issues, and
I was going to die, but it didn't work.
It didn't work out. You just were too stubborn to leave. We needed you to impart on us more. So
Let me come back and keep
please.
up with this grand coalition thing.
We need to keep up with that and just everything else that you know. And I wish I could get it to where I could get you and maybe Craig Washington on one night.
Oh, I'd
together.
love. I worked with Craig on the Eroy Brown case.
Yes, and I've been wanting him to tell that Eroy Brown story before it's too late, because I always call it the bad Eroy Brown story.
Yeah, but Eroy is a great piece of work. There's a good book out on that by Michael Berryhill. It's called The Trials of Eroy Brown. Read the book and watch me and Craig on this show sing and dance.
All righty. Well, we have 30 seconds. Thank you so much for tuning in to Truth and Justice with Vivian King. I am your host, Vivian King. I have enjoyed getting these words of wisdom and history lesson from Ray Hill. He's always done that for us in our audience. At 76, he's the pride of the Harris County community, and certainly of this TV station and all public access radio and TV. So thank you so much for educating us about what's going on in the community and in the nation and the Supreme Court. I mean, as a lawyer, I know a lot, but I don't know as much as you do about the issues you care about. Thank you for watching. Good night. Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something